Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast presented by Zwift. Here we have a wrap up of the Ceratizit Challenge by La Vuelta, a 5-stage race at the finishing on the same day as the men's Vuelta today, but finishing very early. The final stage in Madrid, a sprint finish. To let you know about the parcours, it was a TTT to start, a 20k one too, then the hardest GC stage, stage 2, 106ks with 5 categorized climbs, 2 cat ones. So that was by far the hardest stage. Then, like a typical Burgos, Grace Brown style stage, 96ks, Aguilar de Campo. It's like a plateau. It must be the same area. It looks too similar. Then stage 4 was like a punchy stage, uphill technical pave finish, and then the final stage is a sprint stage, uphill sort of drag to Madrid. So it was all about really the first 2 stages.
Yeah.
In contrast to the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, which backloaded the GC stages. But I should remind people of also the start list. No Wiebes here. There's Jastrab Lippert. Bolsmo was the best sprinter. Did you... Trek brought at least along a Borghini and their strongest team. I feel like Trek, I don't know, they're almost better than SD Works this year. That might be statistically incorrect, but I feel like they're impacting more races and just winning more. Is that just the Balsamo effect?
I think it's not solely the Balsamo effect. I think there's a big factor that Balsamo joined that team, and I think that plays a tactical role. I think that Trek's a tactically better team than SD Works, and as a consequence, they come out with more strategic ways of trying to win races, and they're more prevalent in stages that are where tactics are necessary. And we've seen a few times, like Roubaix is a perfect example of that. In Roubaix, Trek had good tactics, SD Works had bad tactics. And as a consequence, Trek ends up winning that race. That's a big race to win. And it's one of those races where that happens. I think Binda was won by Balsamo because of their tactics as well, to go for Balsamo and not longer Borghini. And I think that plays a big role there. And what was intriguing in this team time trial, this first team time trial that we've got in this race, that is a challenge, is that SD Works has Vollering at the start line, Fisher Black and so forth, but it became very clear that they weren't going to try and keep Fisher Black up there in GC anyway. Like, it's all like Vollering here, which is understandable because Vollering, Tour de France Femme, second best GC rider by far. And in general, I'd argue that she is the second best GC rider in the world. The only person that you could claim to have that spot as well as a Cavalli, but we didn't see her in that Tour de France Femme. And thus we don't know that. Also, we didn't see her in this race, for example, either. Now, SD Works, pretty decent time, but it became very clear that one team was with the best team at this team time trial, and that was Trek Segafredo. Like you said, the strongest team on paper on this race is what I would argue. Yeah, I'd say that. And Shackley and Fisher Black, strong riders at SD Works. Vash has been a bit, I don't know, I think we might have overhyped Vash because of our cyclocross time. Do you have the same idea about Vaj being a bit not necessarily disappointing, but not doing the expectations that were maybe too high?
I'm not sure if it's the CX. I feel like we've commented on this before, and maybe she's had injuries this year. It's more the World Championships. She
Yeah.
came fourth last year, and she's 21 years old. So yeah, I was looking through her results, and yeah, she hasn't kicked on this year. I don't know if there's a reason for that, but yeah, I thought, frankly, she'd be. I thought she was like the next Voss possibly, or like that's a big a big step up. But you
Yeah.
know what I mean. I thought she's the next punchy sort of rider like that. But yeah, Trek win the TTT by 6 seconds on Bike Exchange. Jayco, their women's team has been extremely good this year. 11 seconds on FDJ with Brown as their GC leader. I think ahead of Ludwig, but not entirely sure. SD Works on 23, Movistar 25, DSM 44, Canyon Shram a minute in 7th. So big gaps on the first team time trial. And yeah, that puts Longa Borghini in the box seat, at least for a podium for GC.
Yeah, certainly. Now, obviously, we need to keep in mind that the second stage is the one where the bigger gaps will occur. That's the one you mentioned earlier with 5 categorized climbs on it. I'd argue that if you look at the parcours, knowing the length of the race, that it was likely that the second last climb was going to be the one that action started occurring. But you never know, because Van Vleuten, when she goes, she goes. And sometimes it's fairly early on in the stage, sometimes it's very late in the stage. And we were fortunate broadcast-wise that the real hit came on the second last climb, the Alto Fuente Las Varas. We had two riders that were up the road, including the likes of Lucinda Brand, and those two riders got caught on the Alto Fuente Las Varas as we had Movistar setting up Van Vleuten's attack on that second last climb. 6 kilometers, 6%, enough for Van Vleuten to do damage, clearly, because she made her first hit, and it's like, when Van Vleuten goes, it's like she ups the ante, she ups the watch that she does for X amount of time, and then she goes, drops that a bit again. Then she ups it again, then she drops that a bit again. It's so intriguing because the first time she does that, there's like 3-4 riders that can still follow. And that is the likes of Vollering, obviously, who, as I said, was one of the stronger riders GC-wise in a race like this. Lippert as well, one of the riders that can follow. Longoborghini as well. I think Mavi Garcia was in there as well. I think those 5 riders formed a bit of a group on that climb. And then Van Vleuten does exactly the same again. That same exact move. And that's when a Vollering could follow only. And that's when the others start dropping. Mavi Garcia, a Lippert. I think Lippert dropped first. Mavi Garcia dropped second. And then eventually Longoborghini also dropped. I don't know if it was before the other two or after the other two, but she also dropped with those 2 other riders. And Van Vleuten and Vollering were up the road again. Again, Van Vleuten, same exact tactic, ups the watts a bit. And Vollering not necessarily snaps. She keeps a rhythm, but she can't keep the rhythm that Van Vleuten is holding on this climb, which is an issue if you want to try and win this race. And that's when the descent comes to mind. And I think we spoke about this before. We see suddenly that Lippert, Longoborghini, come back to Vollering in the next portion of the race. But Mavi Garcia, who was ahead of Lippert, is unable to do that. And I didn't see her crash in the descent, but she wasn't a great descender, right? Mavi Garcia? I vaguely remember
No,
something like that.
terrible.
That's probably the reason.
Yeah, Lippert, she's off to Movistar next year on a 3-year deal, I think, but she's pretty good bike handler. Longoborghini, I think, is not too bad too. So even with a 6K 6% climb, a 3K 8% climb, even with those cresting 15Ks from the finish, Van Vleuten's able to put 2:16 into Longoborghini and Lippert Vollering. So that's pretty much race over or on the stage 2, given the parkour to come afterwards. 2:16 is a huge gap. Ludwig, Nuviadoma, Persico, Shabby, Lebu, Shackley, Garcia, Santesteban, and Chapman Chapman was in 3:36 group. The others were on 2:50. So I misspoke. Brown lost a lot more time than Ludwig on this stage. So yeah, Van Vleuten, this is the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift. We spoke at length about parkour design, backloading it for AVV not to just come out and take the jersey easily at the start. I guess Vos wore it easily for like 5 stages or so. But that's what sort of happened in this race. And I don't know, it is what it is. Van Vleuten takes a huge lead and the pressure's off. Although that still means she has to control throughout the race. It means she might be attacked on the next stage. And as a reminder, or to let you know, on the 27th of October, the route of the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift 2023 will be announced. I'm not sure if that's in like 50 days or less. My maths isn't so good at the moment. So that's obviously going to be a big event. It was a big event last year in Paris. I think I'll be going once again. And we'll see, speaking of route design, when we'll be analysing it afterwards, what will the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift 23 route look like? Mm-hmm. Will they backload it again? Will they make it easier? Will they have 2 hard mountain stages and a Planche de Belfi finish? I'm keen to see what it looks like, what learnings there have been from year 1.
Before we go to stage 3, I actually agree when it comes to the parkour design, but I also remember last year in Ceratizit challenge, not channel, that's YouTube, but when it comes to Ceratizit challenge, didn't we have the a stage initially where someone took time, then the second stage which was an ITT, and then I think Reusser was ahead in GC or something when she was not on his D-Works yet, and then Van Vleuten did that crazy attack on day 3, obliterating everybody on the first climb or something. I remember something vaguely like that. I swear she took 2 minutes and a half or something on stage 3 last year on Vleuten. And then the stage 4 was again flat to end, kind of irrelevant for GC in the same way that you just said about this year. This year it's more because this stage becomes earlier in this well, not Grand Tour. I'm not sure if we can call this a Grand Tour with 5 stages. But yeah, I agree. Just in general. Stage 3, go ahead.
Yeah, that was, I think, a softer stage. It had like a 15K 3% climb, and AVV took 250 on it. So, yeah, that's what she can do. And it makes it difficult for race organizers to try and have a balanced race. But yeah, stage 3 was this sort of plateau finish. It had an extended, like an 18K 3.2% climb. AVV was in the driver's seat. So, there's a reasonable size group at the top of that on this plateau in to Aguilar de Campo, and we're talking like 25 riders deep. It dropped the sprinters like a Bastianelli. I think Balsamo had made it over, and Capecchi though, and Sierra. So and Alexandra Manley, so she's fast as well. But riders like Xavi, Kenya Schramm, they don't have a sprinter. It's Nuvidoma and Xavi, and FDJ with Chapman and Grace Brown, they wanted to counterattack. And that's what they did. There were
Yeah.
attacks. AVV has no interest in marking those. If they're not a GC threat, which Grace Brown lost 8 minutes the day before. And so it's up to SD Works to chase, which is actually good, or Trek to chase, which is a good outcome for Van Vleuten. So I swear Benji Grace Brown is like on sort of 3% climbs and then a plateau afterwards. She's almost like you can book her attacking and that attack sticking every time.
Yeah. Although I think this time around she needed like twice to actually make it happen. I think she got away with Krak earlier, and then eventually, by the way, Krak doing really well so far this season after I think some great results in the last month somewhere as well. And now together with Brown in the attack, didn't really work out, goes with Shabby again, and that attack sticks. But what was the most intriguing part of the stage was not necessarily the attack of Grace Brown. That move stuck. That kept on going. She kept on, well, they kept on going towards the line, Xavi and Brown, but the aspect of the sprint that came afterwards, the sprint between the two reminded me of the Tour de Suisse last year, the Women's Tour de Suisse, where we had a sprint between Xavi and Dignan. And I swear, Xavi last year tried to make sure that Dignan had to open up her sprint early or triggered her to open her sprint early. I vaguely remember something like that, leading to Xavi winning the sprint of the two. Is that also in your head? Because I swear she tried the same here and it didn't work with Brown.
I think she like started a couple of times. I didn't. I was reading it as maybe nervousness, but the group
Mm-hmm.
behind was so far behind. In the end, I think you're right because when they actually do open up the sprint and Brown just waits so long, and I was like, when you sing it from the front on, you cannot see where the finish is, and you're like, oh, Brown's not getting in the draft at all. What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? And you realize they've opened up literally 6 seconds from the line. Like I've never seen people go that close to the line and then start opening it up. So yeah, Shabby was playing it. I guess she was trying to trigger Brown, as you said, and Brown beats her in the sprint. Only 8 seconds, I think, ahead of the GC group behind. So no important GC movement apart from Shabby actually, does go ahead of Chapman at that point. But yeah, Bolsmo won the group sprint behind, which was indicative. It was the first group sprint we'd had because it was a TTT and a mountainous stage before of what was to come on the Madrid stage, which was the only, let's call it, pure bunch sprint in the race. Because the next stage, this was a pretty interesting one. Anna Kiesenhofer, I think it was because she's on a team, but then because it was a Conti team, she got
Yeah.
permission to, or she was running for a different team here, the Olympic champion of last year. She was running for Soltec, and so that she could ride in Ceratizit Challenge La Vuelta. And she targeted this stage because it started with like a collection of 2K 5% climbs, about 7 of them. And then it was flat. And then it was like an uphill punchy finish, 2.4Ks, 3.5%, I think, but it was steeper than that in parts, very technical. And she went on a 150-kilometer solo. And you could see it's actually you can tell she is more advanced in her stage planning, in her equipment choices, in the way she wears that equipment, the position she adopts on the bike. She is more advanced, more clued into that than a significant portion of men's World Tour riders. And you can tell the men's World Tour riders who do focus on it, you look at her position, stable. She is not moving at all. And this
Yeah.
is 145 Ks in. Her socks are at her knees, like for the aero benefit. She's got the aero helmet on. And yeah, it's really impressive.
One thing I see in that is that she's got this as a rider. Imagine what her value will be after her cyclist career if she wants to go into a DS or advisory role in teams. I see value in that, a Kiesenhofer in that role as well after her career. But it also confirms that she's been very close on every single stage here so far, like top 30 on literally every stage of Ceratizit, I think, except for perhaps stage 5. So she's consistently showing that she is a deserving World Tour rider if she wants to go that way. She's now signing up in this race as that Conti rider, and she goes in the breakaway in similar fashion as we had in that Olympics last year in Tokyo. And the gap is significant. Like, she's 7 minutes behind NGC before the stage starts. They give her a gap of 9 minutes. I was already like, oh, once again, they're miscalculating here. They're miscalculating, but the gap started dropping very swiftly at a certain point towards the end of this race because other teams were like, okay, we can't give her this stage. We got to try and win as well. And they've also got earbuds, so they know that Kiesenhofer is ahead this time around. So they started pacing there. They close it down slowly but surely, but it's really that gravel section on the last climb, the Tramo de Terra, that I think that's the one that necked her because she was looking good still with 30 kilometers to go. But on that gravel section, the second started going down and down and down. It was a pretty rough gravel section as well. It's weird to see that there's so many gravel sections in women's World Tour races. And in men's World Tour races like Montalcino in Giro and Strade, and that's the only thing we can manage there. But in women's cycling, it's like in Tour de France Femme, in the Vuelta, like it's everywhere. Cool to see, but there's the aspect that I think it broke Kiesenhofer's attempt to win this stage, right?
Yeah, I think so. And she got some help. FDJ were pacing, maybe interested in a ground. Like, lots of teams are interested. Kopecky uphill, good for her and Vollering. Ludwig and Brown, that's nice for FDJ. DSM Lippert, also, she should be, top 3 this stage. So there's even Balsamo, frankly, or Lisa Longa Borghini. So that's the problem for her, is that there were too many teams willing to help Movistar in the end, and that benefited Van Vleuten as well. But in the end, we had this uphill finish. There's heartbreak for Kiesenhofer. She's caught with 900 meters to go, and I reiterate, like, really impressive performance. And I agree that some teams could, like, it would be worth just reach out to her and say, how do you plan for a stage? Like, how do you identify the right stage profiles? How do you develop a plan for it? Like, she must know something or have the skills better than an average DS, I would think,
Yeah.
in terms of that particular skill set. But this stage she's caught, unfortunately, and we have a small group sprint where Lippert, she launches very early, and she's followed by Vollering, and there's Kopecky there. And I watched it back multiple times. I couldn't really figure out who was supposed to be leading out who. I couldn't figure out, is it Vollering leading out Kopecky, but Kopecky doesn't have the legs. In the end, Kopecky gets boxed in badly. It's extremely technical. It's not consistently uphill. Like, the steep parts, and it's flat and fast. It's pave. There's turns. It's very, very technical, this finish. And Kopecky kind of gets boxed out of it. And Persico comes around the outside late and beats Vollering. Now, Persico, that's her first World Tour race. But if you remember from the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, she ran very close, I think, on stage 2, where Mariana Vos, it was a similar uphill finish to Provins. And there's no shame in losing to Vos, but there's no Mariana Vos here. And so she's able to win the stage, goes into the points jersey, I believe, and that's her first ever World Tour win. So she's obviously a huge talent. She she told everyone that in the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift. Now beating Vollering, Longo Borghini, Kopecky, Lippert, and Van Vleuten with a small gap to Ludwig. Even Nivea Dome is the surprise to me, Benji, in ninth on 11 seconds. I think she must have been out of position because she should be, as a puncher, at least finishing with the group here.
I think so as well. Now, I will agree with you that SD Works is the part of this finish that I don't get. We see Vollering sit at the front while pacing for a bit, but not pacing at a tempo that is cruciating to keep Kopecky towards the front. Kopecky not necessarily in her wheel directly either at this point with about, I think, 500 meters, something like that, 600 meters. And Van Vleuten goes on the left of Vollering, and Vollering is still able to like accelerate, so she wasn't riding that tempo to keep their position all right. So I felt like it looked like the situation where you've got two riders where they both kind of want to go for their own chances. So Vollering is being said to lead out Kopecky. Kopecky's not really in the perfect position in the wheel of Vollering, and Vollering probably says to herself, well, I got to keep some energy for myself. Like, it felt like that. And when you do that, then you're not going to get a victory here. And I think Persico, her technicalities, her technique definitely helps. I think
Oh, she's the
we
X
saw
rider.
her.
That's right.
Yeah, I think she in that gravel stage in the Tour de France Femme, wasn't
Yeah.
she the rider that was like
No
doing
hands.
something? No hands? Yeah,
No
yeah.
hands took the musette or something on the gravel section whilst half wheeling Vollering when people attacked. So yeah, like it was very, very technical. And yeah, she got the job done. So that also gave her, as I said, a nice lead in the points jersey. She just had to actually no, I didn't give her a nice lead. I think she was level on at least along a Borghini. And going into the final stage, at least Longa was still in second behind Vollering. No, in front of Vollering, sorry, behind Van Vleuten, and a decent gap because of that team time trial at the start. So SD Works just trying to hang on to the podium, really, and Lippert hadn't been able to take enough bonus seconds. She was 20 or so seconds behind Lippert. But the final stage, sprint stage, it's between Kopecky and Balsamo. I was interested to see how Megan, Jastrab, although she might say Jastrab because she is not Dutch, she is American, who's extended until 2025 with DSM, with Lorena Wiebes leaving. So I was like, well, is she going to be their A sprinter next year? I was interested to see how she would go in this sprint. They do not have, though, their A lead out of Pfeiffer Georgie. There is Mackay here, though. And in the end, Trek Segafredo come up a little bit light with about 600 meters to go. It's Elisa Longa Borghini in front of Balsamo, and Balsamo lets the wheel go. Kopecky has pretty much nobody to lead her out. Bike Exchange, I think, had a rider in the break, but then leading out for Alexandra Manley. And that allows Balsamo to sit in the wheels, waits, and then Elisa Longa Borghini is brought back. And I think Balsamo was side by side or maybe just behind Kopecky. She makes sure she goes right around. She uses Longoborghini coming back as an obstacle. Kopecky's wheels overlapped left in front of I think it might have been Jastrab in front of her, and she goes left, and so there's no draft for Kopecky, and Balsamo's faster. So she gets the gap initially with no draft. It's never been closed by Kopecky, and she wins, posts up with 30 meters to go, kisses the world champs jersey. Kopecky second, Bastianelli third, Jastrab fourth, Bertizzolo fifth, Confolieri sixth. The UAE team a little bit curious. They kind of both sprinted for themselves. I think Bertazzolo finished very, very fast, actually. Bastianelli was just following Kopecky in the draft. She couldn't get out of it. But yeah, great tactics by Trek Benji, and the Italian combination of Balsamo and Longoborghini has just been unbelievable this year.
Yeah, ruthless. And the aspect of Persico being in form and so forth, I'm looking forward to see what that women's team at Worlds will look like. Now, with Balsamo, I think she's actually saying her rainbow jersey potentially goodbye because this might be the last race before the Worlds happen. I'm not 100% certain. I'm thinking so. Now, I will add that I was kind of expecting Consoni to be here in this sprint because she's at the race and she ends up in a group on 7 seconds. So something must have gone wrong when it comes to her because I personally rate Chiara Consoni as a better sprinter than Lotte Kopecky on a pure sprint. I That might be a questionable take, but that's how I see it. Is that a valid take, you think?
Kopeck's not looked as fast, has she, this year? I don't know. She looked like obviously Unreal Classics rider and beat Van Vleuten in, what was it, Tour of Flanders in the head-to-head
Yeah,
sprint. But yeah, I sort of agree in a pure bunch sprint, and particularly when the lead out for SD Works isn't always fantastic. Although Reusser
yeah.
was setting up, I believe. But speaking of world championships, I mean, Balsamo, there's no world championships curse for her. She has won 9 races this year, 6 at World Tour level, including three one-day classics, Binder, Brugge de Pana, and Gent-Wevelgem, and the national champs for Italy. So she, even if she doesn't win, she must. I haven't seen the Italian team for world champs. I would take her. You have to take her. I know the course is punchy, but you look at that Binder result, you look at the Dutch team, and their issues riding with each other in the last few years. I think with Elisa Longo Borghini by her side, and if the Dutch team don't coordinate properly, I think Elisa Longo Borghini's Balsamo's a real chance to win the World Championships again.
Even when it comes to the punchy side of things, I think Persico is one of those riders that could also do well. So they've got
True.
multiple options. Longoborghini can also compete with attacks, although I think the win rate of Longoborghini is more difficult because she
She should
doesn't have
sit
that
on.
sprint. Yeah, she could be that rider that attacks with other riders that are maybe faster and sits on their wheel to try and neutralize them, is what you're saying, right?
Exactly. Say I've got Balsamo behind, sit on them, and just be irritating like that. And especially, it doesn't finish uphill on the 9% climb. It is quite steep, but it is a flat finish, I think. So, Lisa Balsamo on the Italian team is looking very, very good. And also, just their coordination and chemistry. Like, you can't underrate how important that is that those two ride on the same trade team and
Yeah.
they work well in the international events. Yeah, I think they're a very, very dangerous team. Whereas Kopecky, the Belgian team, is a little bit lighter.
Oof.
Um, so even though I think the course is really good for Kopecky, um, I don't know. We'll do a world chance preview properly. But in terms of riders looking good, Balsamo is looking very, very good indeed, as well as her co-pilot, Longo Borghini. In terms of GC, though, Annemiek van Vleuten, who probably will be the favourite still for that World Championships road race, wins by 144 ahead of Longo Borghini, 211 ahead of Vollering, then Lippert, Ludwig, Santesteban, Shackley, Lebu, Shabby, and Navia Doma rounding out the top 10. So Annemiek van Vleuten does the
Yeah.
triple. Giro, Tour, La Vuelta. Does the triple.
Yeah, but like, there's always a question now. Like Giro Tour Vuelta triple here. I low-key feel like when it comes to the Giro Rosa and the Tour de France Femme, those two races I see at like top level of women's cycling. For some reason, the Ceratizit challenge, I'll keep saying it wrong, Jesus Christ. Like, that one doesn't seem to be on the same level for me, and I rate it on a similar level as like a Tour of Scandinavia, for example. Do you feel that like that's wrong?
I think it's kind of like men's cycling in that
Hmm.
the prestige goes Tour, Giro, Vuelta. And it is a shorter race. It's 5 stages. The Giro Rosa is 10. The Tour de France Femme avec Zwift is 8. I think they might be trying to extend that for next year too. So that plays into it as well. In that, yeah, how would you if I don't know, Burgos, like Volta Burgos often has a very, very good start list.
Yeah.
And it's a world tour race in women's cycling, unlike men's cycling, and it's 5 stages. Like we had Van der Breggen against Van Vleuten on a pure mountaintop finish last year, and Lagunas de Naya this year. So if they're both 5 stages, if the start lists are are weaker, then yeah, you have to say it's not necessarily a grand tour, as you said earlier. That being said, to do the triple like that, extremely impressive. She also won Liège, Omloop, second in Flanders, second in Strade Bianca, second in Flesch, absolutely, and won Valenciana in February. Absolutely outrageous season so far from Van Vleuten. And I think, yeah, world champs. She's looking good. She is looking good for world champs.
Yeah.
She did, what was it? She did woke up early and did a 50K training ride to acclimatize to Australian time during the Vuelta.
It's crazy the preparation that she goes into, but it's what drives her and it's what makes her that level extra compared to the competition, and her hard work and her adaptability towards like time zones to be better at certain races. That's what gives her that extra to potentially win the world championships in Wollongong at the end of it's I would say at the end of this year, but it's like in within the next like 3 weeks. So I'm not sure that's at the end of this year, but it's that X-Men. It's also pretty cool to see. Like the stories are crazy. Her riding on training camps with the Men of Bike Exchange at some point as well. That kind of stuff. Those stories are inspirational, I think, for a lot of women cyclists. And I think it drives her and it shows that she's fucking great.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't actually know if it helps.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to just think. It sounds great, right? Oh, it's so driven. But I'm like, but if she wakes up early to do the ride and then still goes to the sleep at the same time, doesn't that mean she just got less sleep? Or is it getting used to, I don't understand. I'm sure she's smarter than me. I'm not a sports scientist, but doesn't that mean you just get less sleep?
I don't know. I
And
don't know her schedule.
Europeans, you're not built for the jet lag when you go to Australia. I book it now. The amount of complaints about jet lag because they're going to be traveling into the future in Australia, or Cosnefro's just like, nah. He's like, I don't go to the Southern Hemisphere. I'm just not doing it. I'd be the third favorite for the race, but you can get fucked. Anyway, there's going to be a lot of those complaints. Van Vleuten won't be one of them because she's adapted. Anyway, that was the Vuelta. Hope you enjoyed the roundup and the style and fashion in which we did it. Let us know. Feedback's always welcome, and we'll see you with the recap of the last stage of the men's race in Madrid later today. Till then, ciao.